Good morning and welcome to Murder Mystery Monday. Today we're going to be talking about a lady named Nannie Hazel Doss. She was born in 1905 and died June of 1965. And here's what she looks like. You see a picture of her. Let's see if I can get a better shot of her. Right there. That's her. And she was arrested in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, she was nicknamed the Giggling Granny and also the Lonely Heart Killer. At the age of her conviction, she was 48. Her hometown was Blue Mountain, Alabama, and she was from, which is in Calhoun County, is where she's from. Now, she was said to have killed 11 total people, a total of 11 victims, 4 husbands, 2 children, her mother, her 2 sisters, a grandson, and her mother-in-law. Her method that she used was arsenic poisoning. Her motive was to collect insurance money. The time period of the crimes was from the 1920s to 1954. It covered 4 states. She was charged with murder of Samuel Doss in 1953 in Oklahoma. Like I said, she was convicted in 1954, sentenced to life at Oklahoma State Penitentiary. She died in prison in 1965 of leukemia. And she would also use the Lonely Heart single ads to find her husbands. Now, her father was very mean. He would always make the family work on the farm instead of attending school, resulting in her poor academic performance. Now, at the age of 7, when the family was taking a train to visit relatives in South Alabama, Nannie hit her head, and when the train had to suddenly stop abruptly. For years after, she suffered severe headaches, blackouts, and depression. And she said that this could have been what caused her to be mentally unstable. Nobody knows for sure, but we do know that accidents do cause a change in head. Anytime there's any kind of head trauma, it can cause severe personality changes. Now, during her childhood, her favorite hobby was reading her mother's romantic magazines and dreaming of her own romantic future. Later, her favorite part, of course, was the Lonely Hearts column. Now, Nannie's father forbade the Hazel sisters from wearing makeup, any kind of clothing that he thought was attractive, as he believed it would prevent them from being molested by men. He also forbade them to go on dances or any other social events. Nannie was first married at the age of 16 to Charlie Braggs. Now, he was a co-worker at the linen factory with her. With her father's approval, they married after 4 months of dating. Because her father wanted her out of the house, it was one less mouth to feed. Braggs was the only son of a single mother who insisted on continuing to live with him after he married. Nannie later wrote, "I married as my father wished. In 1921 to a boy I only knowed about 4 or 5 months, who had no family, only a mother who was unwed, and who had taken over my life completely when we married. She never seen anything wrong with what she done, but she would take these spells. She would not let my own mother stay at all night." So basically, what had happened is she went from a controlling father to a controlling mother-in-law. And this woman was so controlling, she wouldn't even let her own mother stay the night with her. Now, Bragg's mother took up a lot of his attention and limited Nannie's activities. The marriage produced 4 daughters from the time of 1923 to 1927. The stressed out Nannie, she started drinking and occasionally smoking and became a heavy smoker. Both were unhappy with each other, and he would disappear for days on end, and he would not have anything to do with her. So basically, she married her father, somebody just like her father who was an alcoholic and would leave. In 1927, the couple lost their 2 middle girls to suspected food poisoning. Soon after, Braggs took firstborn daughter Melvina and fled. He didn't take the newborn, Florine. He left her behind. He suspected that she killed the two middle children, and he just took off. Well, Bragg's mother died not much later, and Nannie took a job in a cotton mill to support Florine and herself. Now, Braggs brought Melvina back in the summer of 1928, and during this time, her husband, Charlie, was sleeping around with other women, and had been with a divorced woman of his own with somebody else, and she had a child. Well, Braggs and Nannie soon divorced, and Nannie had both the girls back at home with her, the oldest and the newborn. And she had taken them back to her mother's home. Now, Braggs always maintained he left her because he was frightened of her. Well, then she gets married again. Her second husband was Robert Frank Harrelson. They met and married in 1929. They lived in Jacksonville with Melvina and Florine, and after a few months she discovered that he was an alcoholic, had a criminal record for assault. Despite this, the marriage lasted 16 years. So it's kind of a repeat thing. And she was always looking at the lonely hearts to find these with. Now, her grandchildren. Melvina gave birth to Robert Lee Haynes in 1943. Another baby followed 2 years later, but died soon after. Exhausted from labor and groggy from ether, Melvina thought she saw her mother stick a hat pin into her baby's head. When she asked her husband and sister for clarification, they said Nannie had told them that the baby was dead, and they noticed that she was holding a pin. The doctors, however, couldn't give a possible or positive explanation. The grieving parents drifted apart, and Melvina started dating a soldier. Now, Nannie disapproved of him. While Melvina was visiting her father after a particularly nasty fight with her mom, her son Robert died mysteriously under Nannie's care in July of 1945. The death was diagnosed as asphyxia from unknown causes, and 2 months later, Nannie collected the $500 life insurance she had taken out on Robert. Well, in 1945, Harrelson, during the time that the Japanese surrendered to the Allied powers at the end of World War II, Harrison was among the most robust partiers. After an evening of particularly heavy drinking, he raped Nannie. The next day, she discovered that his corn whiskey jar buried in the ground as she tended her rose garden. Well, the rape was the last straw for her, so she took the jar, topped it off with rat poisoning as a result, and he died that evening. She then later had several other marriages. Her third husband she met, Arlie Lanning, through the Lonely Hearts column while traveling in Lexington, North Carolina. Married him 3 days later. He was an alcoholic and a womanizer. However, in this marriage, it was Nannie who often disappeared and for months on end. But when she was home, she played the doting housewife, and when he died of what was said to be heart failure, the townspeople supported her at his funeral. Soon after, the couple's house, which had been left to the Lanning's sister, burned down. The insurance money went to Nannie, who quickly banked it, and after Lanning's mother died in her sleep, Nannie left North Carolina, ended up at her sister Dovey's home. Dovey was bedridden soon after Nannie's arrival. She was already sick. Well, then she died. Looking for yet another husband, Nannie joined a dating service called the Diamond Circle Club and soon met a man named Richard Morton of Jamestown. He was in North Carolina. They married in 1952 in Kansas. He didn't have a drinking problem, but he was adulterous. Before she poisoned him, she poisoned her mother, Louisa, on January 1953, when she came to live with him. Now, Morton died 3 months later on May the 19th in 1953. Now, Nannie met Samuel Doss of Tulsa, Oklahoma in June of 1953. Doss was a Nazarene minister who had lost his family to a tornado in Madison County, Arkansas. Now, he felt a very good connection with her because she had just lost her husband. So they got to meeting, and that's how they formed their relationship. Now, Samuel disapproved of the romance novels and stories that his wife adored, and in September Samuel was admitted to the hospital with flu-like symptoms. He also kept her in line with money spending habits because she wanted to go and spend money all the time. Now, the hospital diagnosed him with a severe digestive tract infection. He was treated and released, and on October the 5th, Samuel died on October the 12th. Well, he was doing better, and so people couldn't understand that, why he died all of a sudden. Well, Nannie killed him that evening in her rush to collect the 2 life insurance policies she had taken out on him. The sudden death alerted his doctor, who ordered an autopsy. The autopsy revealed a huge amount of arsenic in his system, and Nannie was promptly arrested. Finally, she confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, her mother, her sister, her grandson, and her mother-in-law. She never admitted to killing the baby with the hat pin, though, the one that was only a couple days old. The state of Oklahoma centered its case only on Samuel Doss. Nannie Doss was prosecuted and by J. Howard Edmondson, who later became the governor of Oklahoma. She pled guilty in 1995 and was sentenced to life in prison. The state did not pursue the death penalty due to her being a female. Now, Doss was never charged with the other deaths. She died from leukemia in the hospital ward of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in 1965. She is just one of the many women who have committed murders in Alabama, and we're going to go over those over the next couple of weeks. Now, another one that I'm going to tell you about is Mary Perkins. That's the one we're going to go over next week. And if you want to look up information on any of these, check them out online. There's so much information. And just to let you know, Nannie was one of 5 other children. She only had 1 brother, and then there was 4 of them girls. But like I said, she was called the Giggling Granny or the Lonely Hearts Killer. She looked so sweet and innocent. She looked like a loving, wonderful, nice little grandmother. And they called her Giggling Granny because she always giggled about and laughed about everything. I hope y'all have found this interesting, and we will catch you next week when we discuss Mary Perkins.